Hey, hey, hey! This lecture is designed to help you with the urinary system for your Anatomy 202 class, but let's go ahead and just jump right in. The urinary system, we know, is what creates urine, right? So just if I was summarizing it for you, I would say your kidneys filter blood and they remove the toxins that you will TT out. So it filters the blood and makes the urine. Okay, so I want to point out to you first, just kind of an overview. It really helps with homeostasis. So remember, homeostasis is that balance. It helps maintain the pH of blood, the what's in the blood as far as the electrolytes. Water, it helps you keep water in the blood as you drink less water, or excrete water in urine as you drink more water. So it helps maintain homeostasis. The urinary system removes the waste that's in the blood, foreign substances, drugs, things like that. Okay, so you got the kidneys. You want to know this order, so make sure you know this order. Kidneys, ureters, bladder, urethra. So you got two kidneys, and they have a channel, the ureters, and then you got your bladder, that's where your TT is stored, and then your urethra is how it's exited. And so we'll see some much better pictures than that one, but you definitely want to know the order: kidneys, ureter, urinary bladder, then urethra. Okay, so there's a better picture. So you've got the kidneys here, so those are kidneys. Okay, these I'll highlight right there. Ureters, and then of course you know the bladder here, and then the bottom is the urethra. So you want to know that for lab, but really just for understanding. There's a question on the test to ask if you know the order. Okay, so where are the kidneys? They're on either side of the vertebral column, so we would say they're lateral to the vertebral column, but they're behind that abdominal cavity. So if your kidneys hurt, sometimes it's confused for a backache. So it's behind the abdominal cavity. The word the textbook uses is retroperitoneal, which means behind the parietal peritoneal in that abdominal cavity. Okay, so all about the kidney. Now look at this slide. Look at the words, but I'm going to point out the picture to you. So the first one was the renal sinus. So that word, you look at the words on the PowerPoint that you've got printed out, and the picture can be on the video. So you've got the renal sinus here, and that is just that opening. So it says it's a hollow chamber in the medial depression. So that's that area where the kidney opens up. Okay, the helium is the entrance to the renal sinus, and so it's a funnel-shaped sac. Let's see where it is on the picture. Okay, it's not shown on this picture, but oh, there we go. Look at that picture right there. It shows it right here. There we go. So it's just that area where the kidney actually opens up. So the entrance to the renal sinus. Okay, next one. We already did renal sinus. Hollow chamber. Helium would be the entrance. Okay, the pelvis, funnel-shaped sac, superior end of the ureter. So pelvis is here, and this will all be on the lab test, the final lab test, so you want to know that. The pelvis is really, I'm going to highlight it, it's all of this right here. Just that area. Okay, in the pelvis, there's these major and minor calyces, and it'd be calyx, C-A-L-Y-X, if it were singular. And large tubes that merge to form the renal pelvis, or the minor ones are the small tubes. So they're highlighted here, major and minor. You can see this, like right here, would be the major, and then as it separates out would be the minor. Okay, the renal medulla, that's going to be all these on the inside. So this would be the inside of the medulla. One of those is called the renal pyramid. So let me show you that again. So I'll write in black. This is a renal pyramid. But this whole portion right here is the renal medulla. The renal cortex is the outer portion. Let's see, there's medulla highlighted. Cortex, is cortex? Yeah, there it is highlighted. That's just the outer area. So cortex is outside, medulla is inside. Renal columns, extensions of the cortex that dip into the medulla. So that's what I call the pyramid right there. Renal capsule, that's going to be the very outer portion. So that's highlighted there. Okay, and then in each side, in each one of these, so, okay, right in here. So in each one of these, there's a nephron. There's about, it tells you in the book, there's about 1 million nephrons in each kidney. So that's actually a test question. It's later in the PowerPoint. Functional units of the kidneys, and there's about 1 million of them. So we're going to zoom in. Take this right here. We're going to zoom in, and that's what we get. And you can see here the nephrons. So this is, you can see that little round area, and then it dupes down into the medulla. So then part of the nephron is in the cortex, but it dips down into the medulla. Okay, so the left kidney is a little bit higher. The renal pelvis collects all the urine from the kidney and then narrows it as it leaves to the ureter. Okay, what does the kidney do? You want to know this. It filters blood and excretes waste. So this is the functions. Filters blood, excretes waste. So it cleans out the blood and decides what's waste. It regulates the volume, so how much water, how much sodium, the composition, what is actually in the blood, and the pH. It secretes erythropoietin, that's a hormone. It says hormone, red blood cell production in bone marrow. So it's the kidneys release a hormone that stimulate for red blood cells to be made. It secretes another hormone called renin, and that's going to regulate blood pressure. And then it also metabolizes the vitamin D, so it breaks down the vitamin D to activate to the active form for calcium absorption. So it metabolizes vitamin D to active form for calcium absorption. So those are your functions of the kidney. So there's 5 functions I want you to know. 5. Someone whose kidneys are not functioning correctly. Write this in. They may be put on hemodialysis. So if your kidneys aren't functioning, you may be put on hemodialysis, and that's where it's a person's blood is rerouted, so it across an artificial membrane that would clean out or go ahead. It would filter the blood. Normally they get put on dialysis 3 times a week, and so you may know someone who's been on dialysis before. Okay, so those renal blood vessels, we know it says the renal artery. So the abdominal aorta separates out into the renal artery. It goes to the kidneys through the hilum, that opening part, and continues to branch through the nephrons. Okay, the hilum, highlight this, contains renal arteries, renal veins, and the location where the ureters meet. Okay, so let's write that in. The hilum contains renal arteries, renal, I'm going to abbreviate there now, veins, and the location where the ureters meet. And then it separates out interlobar, arcuate. We'll look at all these in the lab. Cortical radiate, so I'm going to show you on a picture. And then the afferent arterioles. Okay, so from the nephron, cortical radiate, arcuate, interlobar vein, renal vein. So let's look at that on a picture here. Okay, so it's not shown on the picture, but just remember the abdominal aorta separates out into the renal arteries. Okay, and that's shown over here. There's your renal artery. Oh. Okay, then the renal artery enters. Now I'm going to switch over to this larger picture here, and you'll see the interlobar. So here they are. Just go with the artery for now. There's the interlobar artery. Okay, arcuate is next. So this is your arcuate here. Okay, cortical radiate, they come up. Now I can always remember this because the word radiate, I'm thinking sunshine rays. I don't know, it helps me. Okay, so there's your radiate. The next one, if you're looking at that last slide still, so we got cortical, radiate, the afferent arterioles. They're not shown here, but they're going to go into the glomerulus right there. So I'll make that, let's see, I'll make that blue. How about that? Goes into the glomerulus. And then you've got the glomerulus, which we're going to talk about in the nephron when we zoom in. So let's write this in. Afferent leads to glomerulus. Okay, and we haven't talked about a glomerulus yet, but we will when we get to the nephron. Okay, within each nephron, blood flow is as follows. So we probably didn't have to write that in. Oh well, we did. Okay, afferent, A, remember, is entering. Goes to the glomerulus. E is exiting, right? So if you're looking, here's your glomerulus in that image. Afferent goes in. I can just always remember that E is exit. E, exit. Okay, there it is in a picture, and you want to know for sure. We just talked about it. The interlobar here. Artery, interlobar artery branches into arcuate, and then cortical, afferent, glomerulus, E. So you want to know that order right there. Okay, nephrons. If I were you, what I would do is I would pause the video and I would go and watch the Khan Academy video that's on YouTube. It's linked in the lab, but I'll link it in the module too. But it's a great explanation of the nephron, and he draws it out and discusses what enters and exits and how. I would definitely go pause this video and go watch that video. It's not too long, but it's a great explanation. And you don't have to answer any lab questions about it. I just put it in the lab and said it was great. Okay, each kidney has about 1 million nephrons, so highlight that. So each kidney has 1 million nephrons. The renal corpuscle, that's around that glomerulus. What is the glomerulus? It's a ball. That's a cluster of capillaries, and that's where blood comes in. So blood's going to enter the glomerulus, and that's where it's filtered. That's the first step. Around that ball of capillaries is what we call the glomerular capsule, or commonly called Bowman's capsule. Okay, the renal tube is going to be the rest of that long pipe that dipped down into the medulla. So the renal tube, that releases the renin. Let's see, is that on here? I'm sure it's somewhere else in the notes, but write it in anyway. Releases renin. And renin is that hormone that regulates water balance and stimulates aldosterone, which does blood pressure. So renin helps with water balance and blood pressure. Okay, let me show you a picture. This will make more sense when you can see it. Okay, so there's your glomerulus. That's your tangled cluster of capillaries right here. Oh, let me go back. So there's your glomerulus. This out here is the Bowman's capsule. Okay, and we already know that A leads in and E goes out. Okay, now look at this picture. This one's good. So here's your renal corpuscle. We call that whole thing the renal corpuscle. And we call this whole thing the renal tubule. So if you look back at that last slide, it talked about the corpuscle and the tubule. So that whole tube part is the tubule. Okay, so this has the glomerulus, and I learned at Bowman's capsule, but I think more now they want you to refer to it as the glomerular capsule. Okay, then you've got right here, right next to the glomerulus, proximal, next to this folded up thick tube, and we call that the proximal convoluted tubule. So it's proximal, it's close to the glomerulus, convoluted, all folded up tubule. Okay, then you've got the nephron loop, which is this part right here. Some people refer to that as the loop of Henle. That's how I learned it, but now they're trying to get away from calling things by last names of the people who discovered it and calling it by the structural name, which would be easier to remember. So that's the nephron loop, and the descending goes down, ascending goes up. Okay, then you've got distal convoluted tubule. In the picture, it's next to the glomerulus, but if you're following the order, this would be distal. And the reason, and then it goes to the collecting duct. But the reason it's distal, let me show you. Okay, so blood is filtered here. Blood goes in. And then what's in the tubule is here. And then it goes down here. And then it goes to the collecting duct, which essentially is going to exit the kidney and be urine. And so that's distal is far away. Although in the picture it looks close, it's not connected. Okay, so this shows you, it says each nephron is a site of urine production. So you got 1 million of these nephrons, and they each filter blood. A nephron consists of the corpuscle and the tubule, so the glomerulus and the tube. The blood vessels associated with the nephron are unique to the kidneys. Okay, so this is a sequence or structures involved in the process of elimination. So it just goes through step by step each structure. Okay, there's two types of nephrons. The cortical nephrons, they are higher. It says this is the majority of the nephrons. Okay, the juxtamedullary nephrons are actually lower. They're in the middle, medulla. So cortical are on the cortex. Medulla, they actually start in the cortex and dip down to the medulla. You can see it right there in the picture. Sit low in the cortex, and so this one right here. Sit low in the cortex and have long nephron loops important to regulating water. There's less of them, but they're more important. So there's less of these, but they're actually more important. Okay, highlight this. The Juxtaglomerular Apparatus, whoops, there we go, is a structure that regulates the secretion of renin. Now remember, renin is a hormone that helps with water balance and blood pressure. So the juxtaglomerular apparatus regulates the renin secretions. Okay, so renin is secreted there. It regulates the Renin-Angiotensin System. So renin stimulates aldosterone to be released. So we call that the Renin-Angiotensin System. Okay, infections. And we've all probably had a kidney infection or a bladder infection. Kidney infections are much worse. They're not near as common. A urinary system infection may just be an infection in that urethra. So it may not be all the way up to the kidneys. So maybe just a bladder infection, which is much more common. Okay, so nephritis would be inflammation of the kidney. And there's two kinds. There's acute and there's chronic. Now, acute is short-lasted, 1 to 3 weeks after you have some sort of strep infection. So you may have strep elsewhere. Then the antibodies will go to the kidneys and they'll cause inflammation in the kidneys. Your kidneys normally regain function there. They normally will regain complete function and you're totally okay. The chronic kidney infection is a progressive disease and a lot of times the kidneys will fail. Okay, how do we make urine? There's 3 steps. And hopefully by now you've watched that Khan Academy video that I told you to watch. And you know these 3 steps. So the first one, if you're looking at the nephron, so here's your glomerulus. Here is your, thicken that up a little bit, proximal convoluted tubule. Here is your loop, descending and ascending. And then you've got your distal. Let's make that a little thicker. Distal convoluted tubule. And then the collecting duct. So hopefully by now you know this. And I can label it for you if you want me to. You've got glomerulus. You've got proximal. I don't have room for that. Proximal, I'm just going to abbreviate. Convoluted tubule, and that's not a well-known abbreviation. I just made that up. Here is your distal convoluted tubule. And that's your loop of Henle or nephron loop. This would be your collecting duct. Oh, that's not very good handwriting, is it? Okay, so let me erase all this. Okay, I'm going to point out now for you where these 3 steps occur. Now that you know the structure, okay, glomerular filtration is going to happen right there. So that's going to be step 1. That's where the blood is filtered in the glomerulus. Pretty easy, right? Step 1, glomerular filtration. The blood is filtered in the glomerulus. Okay, tubular reabsorption is going to happen right here. It's going to happen in that proximal convoluted tubule. Most of it happens in the proximal convoluted tubule. And then in the descending portion. Now, in the ascending portion, that's going to be step 3. Tubular secretions. Okay, so let's jump right into these 3 steps here. Okay, the first one we're going to talk about is glomerular filtration, and that's where it says the first step to making urine involves the movement of water and small solutes from the glomerulus into the capsule. So it's going to enter from the afferent arteriole. It's going to go through these capillaries. Now look at the picture here. It shows you what's in the blood is going to exit the blood into the capsule. Okay, so I've written in, you want to write it into glomerulus. What is the glomerulus first? It's tangled cluster of blood capillaries from which plasma and chemicals leave the bloodstream and enter the renal tubule system. So they leave the bloodstream. Here it is shown close. It leaves the bloodstream and enters the renal tubule system. It leaves the bloodstream and enters the renal tubule system. Okay, why does this happen? There's a force behind it. There's a pressure, a filtration pressure, hydrostatic pressure or blood pressure that pushes it through. So filtration, the main force that moves substances by filtration through the glomerulus capillary is that hydrostatic pressure. Okay, the arterial blood pressure drops. That might happen like maybe during shock. The glomerular hydrostatic pressure falls. And so if the arterial blood pressure drops, then the glomerular hydrostatic pressure would drop, and that can actually lead to acute renal failure. So that pressure is real important. You can see it there. The hydrostatic pressure is pushing it out, and the plasma colloid osmotic pressure is pushing in. So that gives you that net pressure. Okay, Renin-Angiotensin System. So this is basically the renin stimulates for aldosterone to be made. So this system, and you can see it in the picture over on the right side, regulates the blood pressure, the amount of water and the blood pressure. So it says it responds to a decrease in blood pressure. So when blood pressure drops, this hormone system takes in through vasoconstriction and the secretion of ADH. Okay, ADH stands for antidiuretic hormone. Antidiuretic hormone. And what that is, it's a hormone that stimulates to the nephrons to store water, put water back into the blood. Don't secrete the water, store it in the blood. Okay, so it says it results in the conservation of sodium and water and an increase in blood pressure. So if your blood pressure drops, then ADH and aldosterone will be released. Okay, also helps keep the GFR constant. Okay, so there's where you can see just what's filtered and the concentrations of sodium, potassium, calcium, those electrolytes. Okay, this right here you'll notice is also interesting down here at the bottom. So look at glucose, for example. Glucose in the blood. The glucose is filtered back. How much glucose should be in your urine? None. No glucose should be in your urine unless you're a diabetic, and that's how they can test for diabetes. In fact, a long time ago, the way they used to test positive for diabetes was that they would drink the urine, and if it had a sweet taste, you were a diabetic. But of course, we don't do that anymore. Don't worry. No tasting urine anymore. Okay, so step 1 was glomerular filtration. Step 2 is tubular reabsorption. Okay, the movement of substances from the tubule into the interstitial fluid. So from the tubule into the fluids where they can diffuse in the peritubular capillaries. So tubular reabsorption, substances are transported out of the tubular fluid and into the capillaries. So out of the tube, back into the blood. That's tubular reabsorption. So you want to know the direction everything's going. So if you'll remember, glomerular filtration was out of the blood into the tubule. I can't really draw that, can I? Out of the blood into the tubule. Now we're going from the tubule back into the blood. Now highlight this. Tubular reabsorption, 70% occurs in that convoluted tubule. So most of it occurs right here. Only 30% occurs in the downward. Okay, tubular secretion is the movement of waste from the peritubular capillaries back into the tube. So we took it, glomerular filtration, out of the blood into the tube. Tubular reabsorption, from the tube back into the blood. Now we're going to put just a little bit back. So tubular secretion just puts a little bit back. Okay, zoom in. Let's talk just about absorption. Okay, we already said substances are transported out of the tubular fluid and into the peritubular capillaries. Okay, let me talk right here. Active transport is where substances are pumped out. This requires energy against the concentration gradient. So glucose would be pumped. It requires that ATP. Osmosis, highlight this, that's the movement of water. Lots and lots and lots of water is going to go back into the bloodstream so that you don't become dehydrated. If you drink a lot of water, you may secrete more water. And urine is 95% water, so it's really important to drink water. Okay, proximal convoluted tubule. Remember that's at the beginning of filtration, 70% happens there. 70% of the reabsorption happens in the proximal convoluted tubule, that folded up tube right by the glomerulus. But the reabsorption is going to pump back in sodium, water, glucose, things like that. Okay, nephrotic syndrome, a lot of people that have renal disease, kidney failures, will have these symptoms. So you'll see loss of plasma proteins, things like that, edema or swelling, like especially in the ankle area. Okay, sodium and water reabsorption. Now the kidneys maintain the internal environment by reabsorbing water. So they maintain how much water you've got. But you can see right here, sodium is going out of the kidneys back into the blood. Chlorine going out. So in the proximal convoluted tubule, as sodium ions are reabsorbed by active transport, remember that means it requires energy, and water goes by osmosis. So that's important. Water osmosis. Step 3. Tubular secretion. Substances, highlight this, move from the blood. Plasma means blood. From the plasma back to the kidneys. Into the renal tubule. So it's going back. Anything that you reabsorb too much, this is just going to be a little bit of movement. You know, just one or two. Okay, we do want to keep that. We want to go ahead and get rid of that. Substances are waste, distended, so getting ready to make it out and be urine. Active transport mechanisms. Now, a lot of it is going to be drugs. Okay, examples of drugs, write this in: penicillin and phenobarbital. Those are, says some drugs such as penicillin and phenobarbital enter the renal tubule during tubular secretion. The rest of the drugs are going to be liver. The liver does it. The liver releases the other drugs, but some drugs are going to be released here. But this is just going to be, the tubular secretion is just going to be those final hydrogen and potassium secretions. So what you need, what needs to go, what needs to stay. Generally, the potassium stays in the blood and sodium is secreted. But that's just trying to get that balance. Okay, tubular secretion of potassium ions occurs in the distal convoluted tubule. Distal convoluted tubule. Okay, ADH. So it says this is the regulation of urine concentration. So hormones such as we already know about aldosterone and blood pressure. The renin, we already know about that. And then the one that's mentioned on this slide is going to be antidiuretic hormone, highlighted right there. Oh. Antidiuretic hormone is responsible for the reabsorption of water. So, think about it like this hormone, it comes from the pituitary gland, of course, and is sprinkled on the renal tubule, and it tells the renal tubule, put the water back in the blood, we don't have enough. Or release the water. Let me tell you something interesting. When you have a toxin in your blood, such as alcohol, the production of ADH is stopped. It's inhibited. So you don't release ADH when you're drinking alcohol. So remember, what does ADH do? ADH tells the kidneys to store water in the blood. Put the water back in the blood. Don't TT out the water. So if when you're drinking alcohol, you stop releasing the ADH, what happens? You're not storing the water, you're flushing it out. Get the water out of the blood, TT it out, which would be if you were responsibly drinking and not driving or anything like that. We would know that's why you would TT a lot, right? So you would have to go to the restroom very frequently while consuming alcoholic beverages. Yeah, you're drinking more liquid, but also your kidneys are not storing water. And a lot of times that's why your head hurts the next day. It's because you're dehydrated. You drank all that alcohol, your body sensed that there was a toxin in the blood, so you flushed out your fluids, and your head hurts the next morning. So it's important to drink water while you drink alcohol. Very responsibly, of course. Okay, so this picture shows you what does ADH do. So you look at the picture, you can see the water when there is ADH. it leaves the tubule and goes back into the capillaries, back into the blood. Okay, and you can see it's called countercurrent multiplier, and that's where just that movement is perfect. And there you can see the sodium moving. Okay, this is a summary of all the nephron pieces, the glomerulus, and what they do. So what does the convoluted tubule do? What does the descending limb of the nephron loop do? So take a second and look over this. This is a nice summary here. Now, what's in urine? You got urea, which is highlight. It's a byproduct of amino acid catabolism. Urea is the breakdown of protein. Amino acid, that's the building blocks of proteins. Uric acid, that's the building block of DNA. Uric acid, it's a product of nucleic acid. So as you break down DNA, as you break down protein. So highlight all that. Going to be a test question about it. What is urine? It's mainly water. It's not all water, but it's mainly water. But it'll tell you urine composition reflects the volume of water and solids that the kidneys must eliminate. So it's directly related to how often you drink water. One thing I want you to write in, less than 30 milliliters an hour. Write this in, it's going to be a test question. Less than 30 milliliters an hour indicates kidney failure. Okay, renal clearance. Highlight. That is how much you TT. The rate at which the chemicals are removed from the plasma by the kidney. So I'm going to ask you that on the test. What is renal clearance? It's the rate at which a chemical is removed. Now there's a test that you can do. It's called the renal clearance test. It's a test done to measure the glomerular filtration rate. So measure, let's see if it says it, the glomerular filtration rate. Okay, the ureters, that's going to lead to the bladder. A kidney stone, this is an obstruction, such as a kidney stone. There's a clinical application on kidney stone in a second. In a ureter triggers the ureterenal reflex. Okay, there it is. Kidney stone can be composed of, it might be uric acid, calcium oxalate, calcium phosphate, or magnesium phosphate. Drinking lots of sodas, not drinking a lot of water, dehydration. Some people just get kidney stones because it's genetic. They drink a lot of water, but they still get it. 60% of kidney stones pass on their own. Some have to be shattered with like a laser procedure. Okay, so the bladder, and we already said sometimes it gets infected. Okay, trigone, highlight that. That is the floor of the bladder. The floor of the bladder has openings at each of the three corners. Now, detrusor muscle, highlight this. Smooth muscle fibers. But micturition is the process of urinating, and that's on a slide in a minute. But the muscle that's the muscle involved. Okay, there's the position of the bladder in a male and a female, so you can see it. There it is. Oops, let's go back. There it is right here. Now don't get this right here is the, let's go to the purple. That's your uterus. Don't get that confused. The bladder's in the front. So there it is on a female, and then here it is on the male. Well, we'll make it yellow, I guess. So there's your position. Okay, the prostate gland, this is on a male. Prostate gland lies inferior, so below the bladder. A lot of times older males will have an enlarged prostate. It pushes on the bladder, gives them the sensation to TT more often. Okay, the urethra, that's going to be where the TT exits. So, tubular organ that conveys urine from the bladder out to the potty, commode. You can notice it says, I'm not going to ask you the numbers, but in females it's 4 centimeters. In males it's 19.5 centimeters. Look at this picture right here. You can see on the top image, females have a lot shorter urethra than males do because it goes all the way out the penis in males. So cystitis or a bladder infection is much more common in females. Why? Because we have a shorter urethra. I'm going to ask you that on the test. Why is it more common for females to get cystitis or a bladder infection? Because females have a shorter urethra. But what it all lies down to is when we use the bathroom, we have a bowel movement, feces has lots of bacteria in it. Okay, if the bacteria from the feces gets into the urethra, it can cause an infection. Now, that's not getting feces into the urethra is not the only reason you can get a bladder infection. You can get them from sex or anything that would get bacteria up in the urethra would cause a bladder infection. But commonly, feces, the bacteria from feces will get into the urethra, especially in little girls that don't know how to wipe appropriately. So mamas, you got to teach your little girls how to wipe. Males, they don't have that problem. Theirs is longer, their urethra is, so it's not close to their rectum. So bacteria is less likely to get into their urethra. Okay, micturition, that is, as urine leaves the urinary bladder, that's the act of actually releasing the TT. And we already said the detrusor muscle helps with that. Urinalysis, so these are just some kidney disorders. You want to look at all those just to be familiar with them. Urinalysis, that's going to be where they look at the urine and they diagnose, is there glucose in it? If there is, then it's possible that it's a diabetes. So they look at the urine and test for certain chemicals, toxins, things like that. What happens as you get older? What happens to your urinary system as we get older? Oh, let me go back one slide. Okay, highlight this. You want to know this. The bladder, the ureters, and the urethra are going to lose elasticity. So they don't hold as good. And then the bladder actually holds less urine. So older people have to TT more, and they're going to have accidents more commonly. Doesn't that sound exciting? Okay, so I hope that this was helpful. Please email me if you've got any questions, and let me know if I can help you in any way.